guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. We're here with another Reading Roundtable. Slightly late. That's okay. Gretchen's been busy. We couldn't get together. There was a bunch of stuff happening. It's fine. We're here now. That's all that matters. We're here now, and we're here to talk about books. If you haven't been to one of these before, Gretchen and I bring on a couple of our bookish friends and we talk about some of the things we're reading. Sometimes we have a theme where we all try and bring something that relates to a specific topic or genre or whatever is going on in that sort of video. In this case, it is just whatever we wanted to talk about. So something we've been reading, listening to, uh whatever that may be. No theme, so utter chaos. You can expect a whole bunch of different stuff. We are still going to go around and introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about who we are as readers, like what we normally read, so that maybe you could get an idea of which of us you align with as a reader. And hopefully there's something in here that is interesting to you that you enjoy us talking about or want to pick up for yourself. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Gretchen to start our intros, and then we will go around and talk about our books.
Hi, I'm Gretchen. You actually may not know my face. I haven't been around very much recently. I've been finishing the data collection for my dissertation. And when I say this is one of the most exhausting periods of my life, and I've been through some stuff. This is
You
like
mean
my
it better
400th.
be?
Yeah, this is like my 400th like academic degree, and I am done. So eventually I'll make a full video. I told Michaela eventually I would make a video titled Arcs I Should Have Read, but I was having a mental breakdown. So we'll do that. And with that, I haven't really read a real book in 2 months. But one of the things that I have been doing is I've had to scan a lot of student work. I'm doing a dissertation in a classroom. And the incredible news is that most of the students in the classroom have agreed to be a part of my study. They're third graders. Flip side is most of them have agreed to be in my study, and that means that I have been scanning basically every piece of work that they've been turning in um, since March. So I've been spending a lot of time with my scanner. Um, and that means that I've been listening to a lot of podcasts because the episodic nature has been really working out for me. I don't listen to fiction on audio, it doesn't work for my brain. And a lot of the nonfiction that I read tends to be on the denser side. So podcasts have been a nice episodic way to do that. When I listen to podcasts, I also usually listen to, not usually, exclusively listen to nonfiction. Again, fiction on audio just doesn't click for me in the same way I want to read my fiction and listen to my nonfiction. Please don't ask me why. I don't know. But in particular, I've been listening to a lot of true crime podcasts lately, but some that are more on the story side, shall we say, less like there was a murder and here's how it happened, and particularly Canadian true crime. And this is going to factor into what I have to talk about because I'm going to get really excited about Canadian law. Trust me on this. It's going to be really great. And I have some great podcast recommendations for everyone. But when I do read, it's romance or history, political nonfiction. I did read my first romance novel in 2 months again yesterday, and we'll see if I can keep doing that because I am so tired. But anyway, Taylor.
All right, well, I look forward to your discussion of Canadian law, which is frankly one of your less surprising little holes to fall down. Makes a lot of sense in whole field. That's a thing they say. I'm Taylor. I am a children's librarian, and I tend to do a lot of reading in a lot of different directions, but in like very erratic ways. So like I've been clearing through some middle grade stuff just to like kind of fill in that knowledge. I did a lot of scholarly stuff for a middle there when we were um, Gretchen and I were both presenting at a conference. And so that took a lot of my focus. And now I've entered a stage that I've really been enjoying, which is not reading a book for longer than one sitting, with very few exceptions. So I've just been going on little dates with books, different circumstances, and just sampling a lot of things. And not feeling too bad about really liking something, but not really having the drive to keep going. So, all the kind of territory in there, but I brought a few books that in one way or another made a good impression on me. So I'll be talking about those.
Emily.
I'm Emily. I am.
That's my wife.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm Taylor's wife. Happy Pride, fam. I am primarily a speculative fiction reader. I have historically leaned more into fantasy than into science fiction, but that has definitely moved back and forth over the years. I am not a huge fan of horror in general, but I've definitely made my forays into the space with very mixed success. But I do generally try to find ways to explore the spaces that I don't hang out in consistently. So I will do a fair bit of like literary fiction as time goes through, and all of the ways that expresses itself. But I brought manga today.
Hey, manga. I don't think. Well, no, I don't think anybody's talked about manga on one of these before.
No.
No, I keep what I read very much a secret.
Oh, y'all, this is a choice, and I cannot wait to tell you about it.
You say that like I don't talk about fan fiction.
But fam, these are published.
All right. Can't wait for that. And then, hi, if you recognize me, I'm Michaela. I'm the other half of the Betwixt the Books team. Generally, I'm talking about queer fiction. So again, yes, happy Pride. I'm going to be doing that again today. I also read.
Shock.
I know. I also read mainly speculative stuff. Unlike Emily, my house is horror, and I dabble out into other things. But I'll read literary, I'll read nonfiction, I'll read whatever. So you'll see me all over the spectrum, but it is most generally queer at this point in time. And that is true today. I'm going to be bringing the first book in a duology, which I believe is completely finished now. That involves a trans ? Genderqueer, definitely individual. So yeah, that'll be fun. And again, start of Pride Month, so on theme.
Yeah.
Technically, we do have a themed reading roundtable for the month of June for Pride Month, but May's became also June, so now this is just double
Double
reading
roundtable.
roundtable. And we were like, well, we're not actually producing any other videos, so this is fine.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Oh no, 2 episodes of representation.
Tragic.
Well, I mean, guys, we can only fly the flag for June, and then will you
Yeah.
sit up and watch
Otherwise
the
it's
corporate logos
unseemly.
changed to rainbows with me?
Yep.
Anyway, okay, I'm losing my mind. Okay, I'm gonna try to talk about this cogently. Will I succeed? We don't know. So, I don't even know how I found this originally, but I had someone who was saying to me, I was talking about true crime podcasts with them, and they were talking about how like there's a problem in true crime with like sensationalism, obviously, and like forgetting that there are real victims and like trying to like go into the lurid details. And someone had said to me, they were like, I have really really good luck with podcasts from the CBC, and that's the Canadian Broadcasting Company. And I was like, that's a really, it's like a really niche thing. But I listened to one of their con podcasts when I was really big into cons, and I believe I actually have a episode where I reviewed several of them. And I was like, oh yeah, this was really, really well produced. And then that led me to the CBC series Uncovered, and particularly the season called Sea of Lies, which I could talk about this entire time. It was so good. I literally had to listen to the whole thing in a single day because I was so wrapped up in the mystery of it all. And so that one was really good. I highly recommend it. But that led me to randomly a couple of podcasts involving this weird law or weird sting operation in Canada called the Mr. Big Sting. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I don't think
So
so.
apparently there is this undercover operation that is legal in Canada that is not legal in the United States, and it is called the Mr. Big Sting.
So it's not a
And
Sex in the City reference?
it is not. It is not. So I randomly fell into this because I started listening to this podcast from the CBC called The Pit. And it's this really interesting thing where it's actually started by this one person who works for the CBC about an unsolved murder of a woman whose body has never been found. And basically, the whole time, like, this podcast kind of starts to kind of like, I think it's an anniversary podcast, like trying to remind people that this crime remains unsolved. And then while they're making this podcast, her husband is actually arrested for her murder. And then COVID happens. There's a changing of 3 separate podcast hosts because this story, which was meant to be a limited series, goes on for now this whole like saga of the trial and everything like that. So it actually ends up being like a really incredible storytelling experience because they've gone from like what they thought was going to be a single like limited series to like kind of this thing that unfolds as it goes. But basically the way that they got him was through a Mr. Big Sting. And a Mr. Big Sting is where there are undercover operatives and they basically make friends with the target. And at some point, the friend that is with the target, like, they're usually some kind of like shady undercover person. And they're like, we can bring you into our organization. Um, and then eventually they meet Mr. Big, who's like the big leader of said organization. It's like tailored to meet the person. And basically, Mr. Big is like, we found out that the police are looking into you and like we have to clean up your mess. And by this point, they will have seen the organization like deal with similar scenarios. Like one of the people who's like beat up his girlfriend in this case, because it was a man accused of killing his wife. And like they cleaned up after, the guy who beat the wife and like, so basically they lull them into a false sense of security to get a confession. And then all of this is legal in Canada. It's not legal in the United States. But there are so many like specific rules the police have to follow to allow this kind of operation to stand up in court and not be thrown out because of entrapment.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
it definitely here would all be considered entrapment.
It's a little trappy.
And
Yeah.
like that's even like with all of this stuff the US police forces do to like
Yes. Yeah, and this is not allowed.
bring out confessions. But like
Yes.
that's so interesting. They like create a whole elaborate little LARP.
Yes. Yeah. They basically do not realize. I think it's one of the podcasts. I think it's the second podcast, not this one, where he basically calls it like he didn't realize he was like had been put in the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really because of the way that this podcast unfolds, it really gets into like, I wouldn't say the case law, but it goes kind of step by step and it talks to specialists who have like fought for and against this type of sting and like how it works and how in this particular case the police were so careful to like make sure that anything that this suspect did was of his own free will.
So this is meant as an example of a good, like an effective application,
Yes.
if nothing else.
Yeah, because they're literally like this crime had gone unsolved for like 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Like because they still hadn't, and to this day they haven't found her body. And then it becomes this crazy thing where also so like now he's arrested, but then he also like fires his lawyers and decides to represent himself in court.
They love doing that.
It's like it's a really wild time. So I recommend it as like something that's it's definitely not a podcast. It was planned and then it was unplanned, right? But it was really interesting and it goes on like 10 plus episodes, spanning years of this case. And I like the ones that go into the nitty gritty. But then, so I didn't intend this. I just literally was like clicking down a list of like CBC podcasts that I was interested in because at this point I have established that also, yes, on the whole, the CBC, like, these have all come from different people, like different investigative
Mhm.
journalists, and they've been done really well. And with a real focus on like not sensationalizing them and a real strong like victim forward focus. So like you never forget. But so then I ended up listening also to Pressure Cooker from the CBC. And this was the story of two native Canadians, native white Canadians who um, convert to Islam and become radicalized. And eventually, it's called Pressure Cooker because they eventually tried to set off pressure cooker bombs on Canada Day, a la the Boston Marathon.
Ooh.
However, as the podcast unspools, you realize that, I mean, because first of all, you listen to these two, they actually give full consent. Like they give tons of interviews to the podcasters, so you hear from them, right? Like these are some people who are former heroin addicts. They have had a lot going on in their life, and they're clearly seekers who are susceptible to outside influence. Let's put it that way. Um, but as the whole, like how they got, so like obviously the first episode is like they set the bombs and they don't go off, and then they're arrested, and then it's like unspooling it from there. You find out that like they basically could not have done this if the Canadian police force had not been attempting a Mr. Big sting and basically facilitated them all the way to the bomb making.
And that's usually the thing with a lot of these sting operations. They are creating not just the means, but
Yeah,
the
and they have
context.
recordings where like the guy, because it's a man and woman. The guy is like speaking to this guy who he considers his like spiritual leader at this point, essentially, who is an undercover agent. Um, and he's like, I don't. Is this haram? Like, is this what I'm meant to be doing? Like, I want to do jihad, but like, is this right? Like, is this what I'm meant to be? And this is like a man who clearly has like the slimmest grasp on like the Islam, right? Because for most of his religious life and the religion, his spiritual leader has been an undercover cop.
Who is probably not Muslim.
Yeah, that's unclear because they can't go into details about who this person is.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so
Yeah,
anyways,
but
even
you
though they
also
literally do
know
go
the
through the whole
cop.
thing, they build pressure cooker bombs and try to set them off on Canada Day. The whole
Uh-huh.
thing gets thrown out of court, and they're walking around now because the judge just goes, "This was like they would not have had the means to build this bomb if if the police literally hadn't bought half the materials." Like, so anyway, I've been going down like a whole rabbit hole on Mr. Big case law, and like these really incredible, like just well produced, well done stories generally. Um, so yeah, it's been really wild. So thank you to the CBC and all of your incredible investigative journalists who've been keeping uh my head partially screwed on while I otherwise go off the rails. Um, but yeah, this is my new thing about Canadian law that I've learned. Please enjoy.
Love it.
Right. So for me, I want to start with the book I think that really let me down a little. When we were at that conference I mentioned recently, A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers was spoken about. And it is, in short, the story of a food critic who turns to cannibalizing some romantic partners, and doing
As
so
you
with
do.
panache and not a lot of confliction about it. And it kind of emerges through multiple timeline narrative, before and after situation. And it was interesting and it was well written, but it was also very overwrought in its writing, and it was a little too, I don't know. I don't We've had so many talks about literary fiction as a tone and as a genre, and it's a case by case basis sometimes, but I don't have a problem with it. This did not feel like a great application, and I just felt a little disappointed by the whole experience. And so I left it behind for The Swifts, A Dictionary of Scoundrels. This is by Beth Lincoln. It is a story of a weird family that, like, dynastically names its children by putting a dictionary in front of them. And the names they choose are, relevant. Like, you have Arch Aunt Schadenfreude. You have the main character of Shenanigan, who's the troubled middle child with, or just kind of handful, things like that. So it's a very compelling literary story. It is about chasing down a fortune hidden somewhere in the family house, and the family has all gathered for the funeral of their matriarch. And it's just funny. I haven't gotten very far because, again, I'm just kind of doing one-off experiences, but
Show the edges of the pages, though.
yeah, it has a painted edge that is stamped with a little maze, and I think it's very fun.
I think it was Barnes's winner of the children's book award that they do last year.
Yes, it was. I actually picked this up at Barnes and Noble, and I'll be honest, it's a couple years old. I don't know how well it sold over here because it's not something I've ever seen on lists. I don't think my library has it in the collection.
I bought it for her because it gave me really nice Ava Ibbotson vibes, and she was one of my very favorite authors as a small child. I read Island of the Aunts probably 8 times.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which? Yes.
At least 6. Yeah.
Great examples of the young magic narrative. Really good stuff in these times when certain properties are getting paraded out again for another round of profit.
No, thank you.
Anyway, the last thing I wanted to mention is a web serial called Worm. This is starting back in about 2011, so as I've been reading through the first few parts, that's still where I'm located. It is a superhero narrative, like a young protagonist who is just kind of getting into this in an amateur sense in a city with a very complex system of power, and so it's an interesting take on the genre. I'm not really someone who has ever put a lot of time into superhero narratives, but have, you know, been very casual when I have enjoyed them, so this is perhaps challenging my interests a little, but it has come very highly recommended by 2 very close friends, and is potentially a setting we're going to use for a future D&D game that I'm a part of, so it has come to be time that I've taken it, and I would just like to say, it is really, it's well done. It does some cool things, it does some interesting things. What is not so great is that, in part it is just not even edgelord culture of 2011. There's just a lot of stuff that's in it that's just kind of unexamined. And then there is and this is absolutely recognized by the readership as something that changes over time and is kind of in interrogation, and how much the work kind of represents individual things. All of those conversations happen. So I don't mean to be disparaging it or the community that loves it, but wow, it's a different time, and you definitely do feel a lot of casual misogyny, just in the construction of it all, but while that would have given me pause without being encouraged to read it, um, kind of moving forward with that in mind, I've still been able to find a lot that I would say is cool and interesting. And just reading a story on WordPress is fun, I guess. So retro.
It was very 2011.
Right?
I didn't know this still existed.
So today I decided that I'm going to talk about a really aggressively terrible shoujo manga that I started reading a couple of months ago, and I read the 9 volumes of it in like a week, and then there I got to the end of volume 9, and I was like, how the shit are they gonna get 5 more volumes out of this? Like, we are at the end of this story. This is a natural conclusion that is winding up here. It's gonna take like a book. Where is this going? And so then I took a break. And I just got back to it this morning. I just finished like I read book 10. And as I'm nearing the end of book 10, Taylor can attest to this. As I'm nearing the end, like the scroll bar is like this close. I'm so close to the end of this book, and I'm like, how the fuck are there 4 more books? What could possibly come next? And so then
There were no positive noises.
it was so it didn't start bad. I'll come back to the beginning. So like I get to the end of book 10, and I'm like, this is literally an end. What the hell comes next? And I open the next chapter, like do the next volume or whatever, because I'm reading it online. And I open the next chapter, and the first panel is just like, who the fuck are you? And then the next panel makes even less sense. And I'm like, is this like an AU follow-up volume that like happens sometimes in these types of genres for funsies? Like is that, and I get a few pages further, and then like there's one panel that gives half a sentence that is just enough context for me to be like, oh, I see what's happening here. Okay. So I read volume 11, and then I noticed when I went to look for the ISBN number for the digital version that it published in May of last year, which means that even though volumes 12 through 14 are technically available on the internet, I don't have to read them. They're not real. I'm not gonna. Okay, now that we've gotten through that bit, I'll go back to the beginning and describe what this actually is. Okay, so the series is called Vampire Dormitory. And basically, it opens up on this teenaged person who appears to be male. And the gist of the story is that Mito is a girl whose parents died when she was a toddler, and so she's been like living with family members for her whole life, who then decide to kick her out the exact instant that compulsory education finishes for there. And they literally boot her out onto the street and say, you're pretty enough, someone will take care of you. Bye, figure it out. And so she basically starts living on the streets and presenting as a boy so that she's not constantly sexually harassed and assaulted. And then this is all in the beginning, like, chapter. So eventually, like, whatever happens, she, like, decides she's gonna jump off a roof, and then she's standing on the ledge and decides that maybe that's a bad idea and she doesn't want to do that after all. But whoops, there's a gust of wind and it knocks her off the edge. So now she's falling and is like, oh no, I'm gonna die. She is caught by a vampire named Ruka, who basically is like, okay, how, like, why do you want to die? And she's like, nobody loves me and I'm a burden on everybody, so I figured it would be better if I was just gone. And he's like, okay, well, how badly do you want to be loved? Do you want to be a vampire thrall? Because, like, I'll take care of you if you're willing to, like, do the thing. And she's like, you know what, sure, fine. Because she's also, again, she is pretending to be a boy. So this vampire sees an adolescent boy jump off a roof or fall off a roof, whatever, catches him in midair, and then lands and is like, I'll take care of you. And also, like, the premise for the vampirism in this series is that your blood only tastes as good as you are loved. So
That's right, it could be your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault, and you're disgusting, and it's your fault. So like literally, when Mito is saved by this vampire, and the vampire tries to drink from him, he's disgusting because his family doesn't love him. And so this vampire is like, I'll fix this. I'll make you as delicious as any woman. And takes him to live at this boarding school and be his roommate, where he is a secret vampire.
In the dormitory.
In the dormitory of normal human teenage children.
Yep, that's not problematic in any capacity at all.
Not weird at all. Totally not weird at all. So anyway,
I
this
really
is happening.
thought it was a dormitory full of vampires. No, it's
no,
just
just
vampire.
one. Just the one pair of vampires. It's Ruka, who turns out to be like royalty, because obviously, and then like his manservant bodyguard person. Okay, so blah 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 plot. Invariably, we learn that Ruka is like the pending vampire lord who has to find his effectively quote unquote fated mate, the soulmate situation, and then ascend to the throne and like be the lord of vampires. Okay. He has an older twin brother who is separated from his brother as like toddlers and told like, your younger brother's going to be the heir and the lord, so we're gonna send you away to train you to be like hella bodyguard and etc. Like, your life is entirely about making sure his life happens, which of course breeds resentment. And it's a whole, everybody's in love with Mito,
It's
except
like
for there's so much happening. But like throughout this series, the first 6 volumes were actually pretty good. Like, I had a great time reading the first 5 or 6 volumes. Those were very fun. And then it just started getting more and more contrived and like more melodramatic, beyond the point where it was like, this wasn't necessary. Like, we could have edited this out. But there's a lot of like gender mayhem and confusion throughout this one, because like, not only is Mito, the protagonist, pretending to be a boy for the vast majority of the series, there are a couple of other boys in the dorm that are very close friends, and one of them is in love with the other. And through like magic stuff that's designed to fuck with Mito and Ruka specifically, they turn the boy with the crush into a girl, who is then super excited and goes to his friend and is like, I need you to help me find a really cute outfit so that I can go like try to have a date with this friend of ours that I'm in love with. And when he goes to meet this guy out in public, and he's just like, well, I'm a girl now, so we can be together. It can be okay. And the boy's reaction is effectively like, this is not, but you're not you. Like, you're not the person that I have developed this like friendship and affection for. Like, this isn't right either.
Yeah.
So of course this child with the crush is like devastated, because I'm clearly not, like, I'm never going to be good enough for you. Which leads to more drama and whatever. And like, I have decided, based on volume 11, that everything following the end of volume 10 is extraneous and irrelevant, and just like for funsies. Like, it's bonus content, effectively, and I don't need it. As far as I'm concerned, it's a 10-volume series.
When is the protagonist revealed to be a girl to the vampire?
It's like volume 5 or 6, somewhere in there. Like, the series starts to kind of go downhill after that point, because like Ruka and Mito are like very much developing feelings for each other while she's living as a boy. And like Ruka's whole thing is that he like is avoiding contact with women because of the whole like fated mate situation. He does not want to meet his destined partner because then he will never want to feed on anybody else ever again, blah 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 blah. Like once you meet the person you're destined for, you never want anything or anybody else ever again. And because he's like 18, he doesn't
Yeah.
want that.
So
But now he's falling in love with this dude that he picked up off the street. And he still also has to find his bride so that he can become the vampire lord. But now he's kind of in love with this boy named Mito that he picked up off the street, and this is a problem. But then Mito ends up, like, I don't even remember what the reason for it is, but like she's out in the world dressed up as a girl, like in a dress, and Ruka's flying by, like whoop up in the sky, and sees her, and immediately is like, "That's it, fuck, that's my woman," and like goes down to meet her, and they end up separated, and like it's of course then Mito is having like all of this conflict about like wanting him to love her as a boy, but now he loves her as a girl and can't love her as a boy, and it's just back and forth and it's up and down, and it's a mess, but they do get up together and it's cute. They get married and it's very dramatic and unnecessary.
Twink death statistics are wildly skewed by women revealing themselves to have been in disguise.
Yes. Yes. Her parents also end up not being dead. Just to throw that spoiler in.
But they still didn't love her.
Well,
Still didn't love
her
her.
parents did, but she thought they were dead, so they were gone.
So really your taste to a vampire is not by how much you are loved, but how much you believe you are
It's
loved.
how much you're actively loved, like how much you are experiencing love in your day-to-day life.
Absentee parents are just as bad as ones who don't love you.
Yes.
Okay.
The neglect leaves a taste.
It is, well, yeah, it's the idea that like
It's kinda
if
great.
you're constantly experiencing negative emotions, you're going to taste
Yeah.
like shit.
Oh yeah, that's totally fair.
If you don't have bonds and friendships and affection, if you're not constantly or frequently like experiencing some level of joy and connection, gross.
Then you're not going to be loved by a vampire.
Yeah.
They don't want anything to do with you if you're mopey.
No, you're gross. Yeah.
You're useless.
That's so silly.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's immensely silly. Like,
I've learned
called it
so much over
aggressively
her.
bad, which is kind of unfair, but also not at all. But it was fun, for the most part. It was a roller coaster.
It was a spring fling. What
Yeah.
a...
It was worth the time, I think, to go through the first 10 volumes. After reading the 11th, I don't think they're necessary. It just like it goes into a completely different direction. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
that's what I brought today.
Love it. Okay.
Stand up for that ovation.
Yay!
Okay. Funnily enough, I'm also going to be discussing a book where a character pretends to be a boy.
We all love it.
Yeah, it just happens.
Different ways, different means. There's so many ways to pretend to be a boy.
Right?
I love
The book is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley
that.
Parker Chan.
Oh.
It's part of a duology, so the second book is I think He Who Became Something. I really enjoyed this one. I want to say I gave it 5 stars. It's been a couple weeks since I finished it now, but I do recommend this. It was pitched to me at one point as like Mulan, if Mulan was actually trans. So if you kind of think of that as a girl pretending to be a boy winds up having to go to war. The like circumstances of that are different in this, and I'll talk about that. But the reason when I initially talked about this at the beginning, I said trans question mark, is because the protagonist uses she her pronouns the entire time, even when presenting as a man, but does also not identify as a woman. So genderqueer, definitely. I wouldn't say like, if you're looking for like, this is a person who's transitioning into being a man, not quite. Definitely like socialized as a man. Um, and other characters will refer to her as a man throughout the story because they don't know that she's a woman, but she herself still uses she her pronouns while still also experiencing gender dysphoria if someone else does that. So I genderqueer for sure.
We're complicated beasts.
Yeah, you know, just living their life this way. I'm gonna put this down. I don't need to hold it the whole time. That's the cover. You've seen it. The way this book opens up is that you meet our protagonist, and she's described as the second daughter of the Jew family. It at this point in time, they are peasants in the countryside of fantasy China. We don't, you get it. They're experiencing famine. Most of their family is dead. It's just her father, her, and her older brother, Ju Chongba. A traveling like soothsayer type person comes into the village. The father brings his son there to ask what his son's destiny is, and the soothsayer person says this Ju Chongba is destined to be great. Is going to be one of the greatest people there. The daughter, after her father and brother leave, asks the soothsayer, "What's my fortune? What is mine?" And the person says, "You are going to be nothing. You are nothing. There is nothing." And she immediately decides that that's wrong, that she's refusing to be nothing. Not long after that, bandits raid their village, kill her father. Her brother basically just gives up and dies by refusing to eat or drink anything because their father dies. So then the daughter decides to, I'm going to be Ju Chongba. I'm going to take his fate and I'm going to become Ju Chongba. So then for the rest of the book, she is Ju Chongba. Her brother was supposed to go to the local monastery and become a monk when he turned 12. She's technically 2 years younger than him. But she goes there and pretends to be him, and he would have been 11 at this point in time. Gets into the monastery and then grows up to be a monk. Then after, pretending to be a boy the whole time at the monastery, on the day that she like becomes an actual monk, like earns the title of monk, is no longer in training, their monastery gets raided by fantasy Mongols. They come in, and this begins her entanglement with a eunuch general in the Mongol army. He's kind of our secondary protagonist. We get perspective chapters from him as well. But he burns down the monastery, and then Ju Chongba decides that she's going to help the rebels in fantasy China to fight back against the Mongols who are coming. So you get perspectives from this eunuch general. Oying is his name. He, as a child, his father did something that got their entire family killed by the Mongol king. Um, uh, I think he said he was like 8 years old. Rather than dying, agrees to be made into a eunuch. That way their family line is still ended. So while he is alive, he is no longer able to continue the family line. And this is essentially like a huge disgrace. Like, it's better to be dead than to live like this. And his storyline is he wants to avenge his family by killing everyone who had a part in killing his entire family. The tragedy of it is that he is in love with the prince of that nation, and He has a lot of issues with that. Like, he personally has a lot of internalized homophobia about that in conjunction with his gender issues, because a lot of people treat him in feminine terms because he no longer is a man. He has been physically emasculated. So there's that part of the gender stuff that's represented in that part of the story, as well as the part of Jungchoba, who is a woman pretending to be a man. So, like, two different sides of the coin of people who are definitely, like, genderqueer individuals and trying to navigate cultures that are very hyper masculine presenting, like, very, like, both of these cultures do not respect women, don't view them as people, they're more as property. So there's that sort of nuance and discussion going on throughout the book, and they meet at different points and do different things. There's obviously different storylines going on throughout this, but I really enjoyed this. I am going to pick up the second one when I get a chance to. I highly recommend this one. So, She Who Became the Sun is super fun. There's politics, if you're into that, in your fantasy books, like a lot of, like, different people trying to gain ranks in the army and have control of certain cities and things like that. So if you're that type of fantasy person, that's there. I'm not usually that type of fantasy person, but I didn't dislike that aspect of it, so
Cool.
that's also there.
I'd heard about the book
Mm.
before and, heard nice things about it, but this definitely puts it properly on my radar.
It sounds really
However-
compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I like horses.
There are things about horses in here, yes.
I was sure there would be.
There was the sad homoerotic death scene at the end. That was super interesting.
It did involve horses.
I mean, there were horses involved, but not in the act of death, but around the time of the death. Yes,
That's
there were,
good.
there were horses.
I'm relieved, actually.
So one of the most amazing things about when we do unthemed roundtables is the absolute, if I can use a good word from the discussion, shenanigans that ensue. Because there was no rules. We make the rules, and the rules are chaos. So thank you for hanging out with us as we've just talked about all of these random things, and obviously thank you to Taylor and Emily for coming in to this wild who knew what was going to happen when it was going to happen situation. Everyone may not be surprised that trying to schedule something for 4 adults is not really like the easiest thing in the world.
This one was super easy.
We only pushed
rescheduled
it back
thrice.
once. Anyway, so because this did get pushed back late, this will come out in June, but it was like meant to be our May reading roundtable because we try to do one of these a month when we can. So technically, there will be 2 reading roundtables in June. The other one is themed. We try to, every other with the theme in case there are folks that just like really don't want to do a themed one, because the whole point of the unthemed is just show up with what you have, right? Less stress. For June, because it is Pride Month, we are planning on doing a nonfiction themed episode to go along with Pride Month, because Michaela and I were both talking about how even though we'll read nonfiction, we don't read a lot of queer nonfiction. And we wanted to make space both in our reading roundtable, but also this is coming out of our buddy reading challenge as well, where we have, I think this year in particular, we always try to do this, but I think this year we really, really made a deep attempt to stretch even categories that we normally include, like a queer romance, and try to like really push that into areas that maybe we don't read a lot of. So we hope that you will join us for that. I have hope that because it is nonfiction, my brain will start to click word over and do that. And then of course we'll have guests for that as well, and we will see you then. Will we do other content, Michaela or me or us both together? We don't know. We don't know because we make the rules, and the rules are chaos. So you will know when we know. So See you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.